Yeah.
Sweet. All right. Well, thanks for joining, folks. This was an idea that we just kind of put together. I think Billy shot us an idea, and we've been looking for ways to try and drink beer together and talk with one another in these kind of tumultuous times. So uh, thanks for joining us. As you think of ideas, make sure to throw them up in the chat. And if you think of questions, make sure to throw those up there too, and we'll make sure that Mac can address those. So I think everybody here knows Mac, but just for when we post this other places, I'm going to introduce him. Mac is one of the brewers and one of the co-owners at Diametric Brewing Company, and a fellow ZZ hopper. And yeah, Mac, take it away. What is there? How did I do as far as introducing you?
Way overdone.
Okay, good. I prefer to do that than undershoot it.
Um, Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
We had some questions that we kind of thought of. We'd like to try and do this with a different person in the industry, maybe once a week or once a month or whatever. So if you're cool, we've kind of compiled those, and people will be thrown up in the chat for you to answer as well.
Fire away.
Cool. So we'll dive right in. And if any of them are like too heavy hitting or anything, just let me know. The first one that was thrown up was, how do you go about creating a brand for your brewery?
Are you asking specifically like how you came up like a name and how you come up with all of that?
Yeah, I think it was that. And then also, like, how do you go about making names for your beers and how you just symbolize like a vision for what you have for your brewery?
Okay, because I was gonna say, yeah, like in the commercial world, branding is actually beers. So all of our brands, like TD Tossin is a brand of ours, things like that, they're individual brands. As far as branding beers goes, it's come up with something funny, come up with a couple backup plans because the first one's probably taken. Um, and then some of ours, we've got names that are more in tune with what we are, what we do. And then a lot of our names are just meant to make you giggle a little bit when you get it. As far as branding the brewery, that's probably the toughest thing that we did twice because that was fun. And that, that you got to come up with something that's not too long, but also something that can roll off of the tongue, something that has a something that has some sort of a backstory, some sort of a backup for it. You can't just throw out a random word and call it a brewing company behind it, and go from there. And yeah, as far as beers go, I mean, we've got funny names, we've got simple names, we've got all sorts of that. Pondside, because a pond is right outside of our brewery. Juan Moore, you want Juan Moore. Our fooder is sitting on pawpaws. Good thing we claimed that one because I like it when you call me Big Pawpaw. That one will be coming out soon. So stuff like that is just making people giggle, giving them a little something or other to the day, and then making sure that whoever's got rights to it is open to it or go for it.
Sure. And when you're creating different beers and whatnot, is there kind of a central idea that you try and work out from there when you create your beers, or are you just kind of going down different paths and seeing where they end up?
It depends. I mean, sometimes we come up with a beer name before we come up with a beer, and then make the beer to follow it. There's often just as many times where we create a recipe and we've brewed it and we're sitting there trying to figure out how to submit a cola for it because we don't have a name for it, and pale ale isn't really catchy, so we wanted some. We got to figure out something to call it.
Cool. What about your favorite hop and why you like it so much?
Oh, oh shit. Uh,
I think
Favorite
you can
hop.
thank Billy for that one.
Yeah, thanks, Billy. That seems like a you question. Um, I'll go ahead and stab that one in a few different ways here, because I don't have one across the board, if you will. My most recent like example is for New England IPAs. I've been playing with Racal a lot. So that's sitting in World Champion a little bit. It was also in Hopspin. big fan of that one. For the Pilsners, Sweet Action Shocky. For the Pilsners, Pecco is a really, really fun one to play with. For some of our simpler stuff, like we had that Smash Lager on for a little while. And that one we had all cashmere, which I really, really enjoyed using for something simple like that. For a pale ale, you know, if you're trying to stick with the more traditional American pale ale, Cascade is probably one of my almost always go-tos for something like that. Um, Galaxy's cool, obviously, for all purposes, but it's just not my. I mean, it's so hard to get that it's hard to make it a cup of tea, if you will. Go from there.
And kind of like going along the hop route, how do you go about matching and blending hops into a beer?
Um, that's looking at all the different acids in them, and just knowing and reading and listening to what's in those, what breaks down, what do you get out of each of them. Citronellones are obviously pretty citrusy forward. You've got a lot of stuff like that that you want to try and play with, and it just depends on what your profile you're going for. You guys probably all have had or seen or heard of the Hemperor, where when you opened it, people thought you dealt weed right away. Um, those hops are not your typical Galaxy or anything like that. Hi, Jimmy. I see you, buddy. I see you. And so some of that kind of stuff, you know, you just got to break down the oils and look at what you're actually getting into. And when you start going in, actually, there's a book. I don't remember what the official title of it is, so I'll see if I can work and talk here, because why not? It's the oh shit. It's a book on hops, and I don't remember what it's called. I order it every year, and I keep it at the brewery. It breaks down literally just about every hop you can find, and when you have it, it's kind of a nice little resource, especially when you're trying to figure out what will marry with each other pretty well versus what just clashes instantly.
Cool. Kind of sticking to formulating your beers and thinking of that kind of stuff. Do you have any favorite yeasts to brew with?
I do. I'll post the link here for everyone. Um, the favorite yeast. So let's see here. There's a few on that list for sure. Right now, Sour Vise is an incredible yeast to play with. It's a lot of fun. It's really tough to get your hands on it, but it is a lot of fun. As far as style wise, again, kind of plays that role. A blend of Sour Vise and London 05 is pretty fun for a nice sour hazy IPA, which is why I'm taking down Eric's Million Watts right now. We're going to come out with another new one. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a simple 05. My personal favorite stuff is fucking around with barrels. I'm not sure how many kids are around here, but I like messing around with barrels. So going the mixed culture route has been a lot of my listening to podcasting, reading up on more than the usual lately. I've been playing with a lot of new strains coming around. Tanner Vaughn and I got together. He's from Pathlight Brewing. I'm not sure if you guys know who that is, but Tanner and I got together and created a couple of blends for ourselves, and then inoculated a puncheon that we got from those guys that's sitting in the brewery right now. So those are mixed cultures are going to be one of my favorite things to mess with. But for standard clean, it's always fun to get something simple like 05. It's something just as fun to get like a Kvik yeast. And then for Sour Vise, that's a yeast that is really taking off and kind of blowing up right now.
Yeah, cool. If you don't mind, I'm gonna take you more down the wood age stuff. How do you go about creating any beers that touch wood, and how do you recommend people start that process?
Um, Jimmy, I see you giggling. He said touched wood, yes. Um, as far as like getting into the barrels and stuff like that, I'll tell you exactly what Devin and I did, and it's what I would recommend anyone to do. and that's fuck it up. You got to be shitty to get better. So the first barrel that Devin and I did is actually sitting in the basement, and we slowly over time tried to rectify it, and we actually got it to where it is pretty enjoyable, and it actually became a culture that we used and propped in and pitched into a new barrel at the brewery. But as far as getting into it, don't go trying to get a 53-gallon barrel and do all this, do all that. The better thing to do would be to put down a plan of action, whether you want to ferment in plastic or ferment in stainless, and then go to an oak aging process and secondary fermentation with Brett. That's one thing. Or if you want to, barrel ferment and barrel age, that's a whole different thing. That would kind of change a lot of what your style is, what your hops are going to be, balancing your PDO out and things like that with your hops, and making sure that if you're trying to create a Solera project, for sure that you've got a culture that actually is going to sustain itself. And then on top of that, knowing what to pitch in on the next one, or controlling the hops with PDO. Again, playing that game is a kind of a bitch, but it's a lot easier to learn on the small scale before you go to the big scale.
Cool. We're kind of jumping around, but I think you'll be okay with that. What's something that surprised you the most about opening a brewery?
That's a hell of a question.
I think that was also submitted by Billy.
I don't know. It's a lot about prioritizing and prioritizing your time, and then also trying to find a way to manage what feels like 1,000 things at once, no matter what the day is, what the time is. You can't be bored. If you're bored, you're doing something wrong for sure. There's obviously times that you're not going to be running around and working on anything specifically, but there's a lot of times that you have to be proactive more often than not on everything from planning a beer recipe, planning what you need to go into it, planning the cola behind it to be able to legally sell it, and all of that. And then you also at the same time have to be reactive for when something like novel Corona comes around and fucks up everything in the world. So yeah, it's kind of a whole clusterfuck of an answer there.
Sure. What about, I mean, maybe excluding current situations, but like what have been maybe some of the biggest setbacks or problems that you've had since opening the brewery, and how did you overcome those?
Biggest stuff that we're working through, aside from current stuff, we were actually just starting to get our brew schedule nailed down 2 weeks out, which for a long time we always stressed about that. We always couldn't figure out, are we just way behind? Are we dumb? How are we just going day by day? And if one of my mentors, couple of my mentors that I've had in this game are Michael Reynolds, Aaron Bryant, and Brian Stewart. So Brian Stewart is now Brewing for Smoke, was previously with Double Shift. Michael Reynolds is now with Alma Mater, previously Crane. Aaron Bryant was also with Crane. And all three of those guys were guys that I would reach out to and talk to about that kind of crap. And they were the ones that literally told me, it's 2 years before you actually have that nailed down. And if you have it ahead of that, then you're probably not brewing enough that you're real viable in the world anyway. Because that is just kind of how it goes, unless you're planning on focusing on six different beers and that's it. We were obviously very different. We were hyper experimental for a while. We still very rarely brew the same thing over and over and over again. Obviously TD, one more, some of those we have created staples, but the bulk of our tap wall does rotate as often as possible, and we're turning and burning. So that would be one of the bigger setbacks that we've ran into before. Just trying to figure out, scheduling of this, that, whether it's an order, whether it's this, whether it's that. There's just a lot of moving pieces, and it's a lot of making sure tasks are delegated properly, and things along those lines.
Cool. Along those lines, I think Kevin Olson asked this one, and if you'd be willing to share, actually, this is from Jimmy, if you'd be willing to share, has there been, like, what was the largest unexpected expense that you had as you guys were getting ready to get this thing started?
Ours was probably extremely rare to anyone that's actually looking to go pro. Ours was the license tax in the city of Lee's Summit. And basically, that's a really, really dumb thing to get into, but what it is, it's the American Traffic Association wrote a book on how much highway access to street access to parking spaces you have versus your business style, and then how much you owe per parking space per car. That was really unexpected. When we went sat with the city of Lee Summit, they told us to expect around $3,000, and then they sent us an invoice for $27,000.
Wow.
Didn't expect that. As far as secondary to that, you've got, unexpected expenses, or the biggest unexpected one. I would probably say something along the lines of we knew it was going to be expensive going into it. The budget numbers were pretty accurate, but it was still a big number to swallow, if you will, and that was just the construction cost of going into a space that had nothing. Other than that, everything was, and other than the license tax, everything's been pretty on par with what we were thinking about. Everyone in this group's probably thought about or talked to someone about going pro at one point, and they've always heard the same thing I did, which was double your budget and extend your timeline. Every brewery that opens thinks they can beat it. The reality is you can't. It's just the simple truth. That's how it works. That's how it is. There's a lot of that day one that you got to realize you better just give in, because there's no one in here that I see wearing a horn on their head. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great tip. We're going to kind of dive in to some of your beers. Like, I'm drinking World Champion Hazy, and this one's from Kevin Olson. He asks if anybody from the Chiefs franchise has reached out to you or the brewery, and if they've said anything about TD Tossin or about any of the more Chiefs forward beers, and what they thought about it.
Fortunately, the Chiefs are a big fan. We don't get to publicize much of it. We kind of are on essentially we've got like a censorship from them where we're not really able to post a whole lot that ties directly to them. We are still working with Patrick Mahomes to get with 15 of the Mahomes for basically a donation in perpetuity with the Hazy series. That being said, yeah, I've gotten to meet Mahomes 3 times now. Once he saw the beer, that was kind of cool. We did find out he actually retweeted us one time when we were New Axiom, but he spelled Axiom with an N, and that didn't go well, and we didn't find it. So yeah, there's been all sorts of fun stuff, and the Chiefs have been really cool about a lot of that. I actually got Neil Smith and Kevin Lockett and some other guys in the TD Tossin shirts. I don't know if any of you guys saw that, but that was kind of fun. There, play the whole camera in a camera game. But so that's Kevin Lockett, Deshaun Barber, and Neil Smith and TD Tossin shirts, and we actually have seen Deshaun Barber and Kevin Lockett at the brewery now. They're pretty cool dudes. So yeah, it's been pretty good with the Chiefs so far. I don't know if you guys know, they won the Super Bowl.
I think most of us are aware. Talking more about TD and your other hazy beers, what process do you go through when you're formulating a hazy IPA recipe?
Shitloads of hops. Temperatures of those hops is what becomes most crucial. Hazy recipes are pretty easy to formulate. You've got 4 key things in there. You've got your base grain, which we use for all of our anything with hops. For us, we use Golden Promise. And then you're gonna have flaked oat. You're gonna have white wheat, and then you're gonna have carapils, which is the same thing as dextrin, which brings that body up. As far as any other brewery, you can talk to probably anyone. Those are going to be the 4 key things. Some guys will use some flaked wheat in there. You'll see some guys throw naked oats in there. Realistically, the recipes are all pretty simple, pretty straightforward. There's really not a lot of crazy to it. As far as the hops, you've got to figure out what your profile is going to try and be. Excuse me. What you're trying to put together, what you're trying to get out of it, and then with that, you start to put together your whirlpool additions, and then you start to put together your dry hop additions. For TD, our first dry hop goes in with the yeast, so it's at pitch. The thing that came out that kind of debunked a little bit of the biotransformation is when your New England IPAs take off again, what you actually are also, what you might be forgetting, not trying to be an asshole, is that all of those little T90 pellets have a 10% glucose sugar to them, which is actually what keeps them in a pellet form. So that is something to think about when you're actively hopping in New England, or if your New England stalls out or you've gone terminal and you hop it, you will likely see activity because of stuff like that. But hop temperatures is the number one thing I'm going to look into.
Sure. This one's kind of more of a joke question, but do you think haze is important for New England?
Interesting. I am the guy who probably not the one to talk to. I enjoy drinking a good New England IPA. I also don't get my dick hard from New England IPAs. They're cool, they're tasty, they can be done well, but they're at the same time they're not my entire world. So for me, it's not, I drink a good lager just in the same amount of time as a good stout versus a hazy IPA, but you do typically want haze in there.
And you already mentioned it, but it's kind of a similar question. How do you go about, like, what's your process for coming up with a recipe for stouts?
For stouts, base malt, thick. What do you want to come out of it? I hate Carafa 2. Pretty much all of the pro brewer world hates Carafa 2. The reality for us is with you're going to want the bigger base malt. So typically we'll use Golden Promise and Maris Otter, a blend that's usually more favorable. Sorry about that. To Maris Otter. You're going to want, it depends on how big you're trying to go, how big you're trying to get. Number one, if you're trying to do the big thick ones, throw your efficiency away. Doesn't matter. It's a number. It just means how much more grain or less grain you get to use. Secondly, are you guys the ones texting me just to fuck with me? Jimmy is. So as far as that goes, just kind of figuring out what profile you want to come through on there. If you're wanting the roasty, if you want the chocolatey, if you want the real thick body in a blend, you gotta kind of figure out what you want. And I could answer more directly on something like that, but I really like Carafa 1 and Carafa 3. If one of them hits my recipe, the other one does as well. I am a big fan of Black Patent for coffee. You'll get coffee and dark fruit, some raisin out of that, stuff like that. Yeah, I also I ferment all of our imperial stouts on what probably comes down to a 3 times the molecular weight necessary on London Fog. Keeps them a little smoother, keeps them a little creamier. You do get a good attenuation on them. It will take a little longer, but they will chug through.
Following up with that, Kevin Olson asks, do you re-oxygenate your big stouts after a day or two, or just let it ride?
Let it ride. We oxygenate on the way in, and then we let it ride. We've got, so most of our imperial stouts we'll go on London Fog with those. And thank you, Shockey. Oh my God. Thank you, Thayer. Thank you, Jimmy. Jesus Christ, people. The way that most of us are going to do that is with a calculated rate of oxygen. So we're going to use 1 liter per minute on that, cubic liter per minute, and go in, and then we will, again, just let the London Fog do its job at that point. But we do use a very heavy molecular weighted London Fog for that.
We have a couple of people who are asking, what's the hate on Carafa 2 about?
I just get burn out of it. I don't get anything. I get more of that carbony char out of it rather than the smoother coffee, smoother chocolate side of it. It's one of those where it's kind of like any kind of smoke form in a beer as well. You're going to run into it's very, very quick to overdo itself, and at that point, you can't get it out of there. You can't cover it up.
Cool. We'll kind of move away from some of the stuff you guys are doing, if you're okay with that, and ask just more broad questions. What are your favorite 1 or 2 Kansas City based breweries and favorite 1 or 2 non-Kansas City based breweries, and why for each of those?
Boy, you guys know how to make it get real fucking awkward. Kansas City based breweries that are my favorite.
We don't even have to say favorite. We could say if you really enjoy certain aspects about what they're doing.
Wow, that's a really alternative way of saying favorite. I do really like Sandhills. I've always liked the Williamson twins. I think what they do is great. I think the program they run is great. They're very similar to us, where end of the day, who knows what you got out of it, but we'll find a way to make it fun. We'll find a way to do something cool with it. They're into barreling a lot of shit that people don't normally barrel. They're into finding ways to make things a little more intriguing in a barrel. That's a reason that we have a perpetual 4 barrels with those guys. They've got one of ours that's sitting in their brewery that after all this shit, we're going to get in there and do a couple of collaborations with them. And we're actually going to do a blended barrel ferment project. So I really like what they're doing a lot. As far as breweries that I like what they're doing, I'm a fan of, there's no beating around the bush. Double Shift is a good friend of ours. We definitely like what they do. We like the variety pack. I like, City Barrel's got a good, they typically follow the trendier beers, but they do a very good job of it. Jay's a very good brewer. I did a lot of beers with Grant prior to opening a brewery. Did a lot of fun stuff with him, and he and I bounced a lot of yeast stuff back and forth. As far as true to form, Alma Mater has popped up, and Nick is a wealth of knowledge. Nick's probably got the best resume in town. You've got KC Beer Co. that, if you're into the German beers, it's hard to fuck with that. It's hard to touch it. If you've got, the hankering for one thing that does bother me, I'll say this. One thing that really pisses me off is the people who dog on Boulevard. Boulevard is as OG as it gets. I have nothing but respect for those guys. You're talking world-class beers that come out of there. Good friend of mine lived in Seoul, South Korea for 4 years. The first day he got in town, he and his wife went out for a drink, and he said, "Bring me your best beer." And they delivered him a Tank 7. And when he tried it, he said, this just doesn't taste quite like the right Tank 7. And it's because it takes a month to get there. But by far and away, Boulevard is always going to have a place in my heart personally. As far as breweries that are doing it right, I don't think there's a whole lot that are doing it wrong. It's a lot shorter list of guys I don't like in Kansas City. and we're not going to go into that question.
Yeah. How about same question, but for non-Kansas City based?
Non-KC based. I love Black Project. I think they do an incredible job with some very unique fermentation, some very unique ideas. I don't like you personally. That's what I don't like. I do like Side Project. I have a respect for Corey King, to say the least. Dude's a cool dude. As far as beer wise, I like Side Project. I like Black Project. Lauren Salazar, now Lauren Woods, has been kind of an idol of mine. She was the Food Force director at New Belgium. She's pretty awesome. Got to meet her. If you're looking for straightforward, true to form styles, Dangerous Dangerous Man in Twin Cities is pretty damn tasty. I love Lost 40 down in Northwest Arkansas. I think those guys put together a really good variety pack of beers. Cigar City is a very good place. Again, kind of the Boulevard size range, but pumping out good beers, good quality options. If you're into the big, thick, chewy stouts, I really like Angry Chair. Cycle, for that matters, also very good at their stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of pick your poison. I've got quite a few that I'll enjoy quite a bit. Oscar Blues is another one of my, if I'm going to see it. Lagunitas as well. If I'm seeing it on the shelf, that's what I'll grab for a float trip or wherever I'm headed to.
Cool. Different path. What tips do you have for newer homebrewers?
Newer homebrewers. Again, sorry if your kids are around. Fuck it up. Don't be afraid. First beer I ever did on the first system I ever built, the first time on my own, was a double IPA, 10.7%. Don't be afraid. Fuck it up. That's you got to be shitty to get better. As far as what I would also tell people is to start, slowly work into the fermentation side before you go too crazy on the system side. The brew house can be, whatever it needs to be, a turkey fryer, but if you can ferment well, you've got a really good start. Another thing would be water. If you're just grabbing tap water or water out of a hose, I've seen guys brew good beer out of water with water out of a hose. I'm always curious to see what happens if they use better water. That being said, fuck it up. Don't be afraid. Don't be. What's the worst case scenario? You're throwing away 5 gallons of beer.
Cool. And then how about for more advanced homebrewers?
Again, fuck it up. Go get it into your next level, if you will. If you're advanced and you're thinking that if you ever think that you know everything in the world, or if you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're not. I'm in an empty room with myself and I'm still not. That's just how that works. One of the things that I would say is dive into the mixed culture. If you hate sour, if you hate mixed culture, if you hate all that, whatever, dive into barrel fermenting, dive into oak process, dive into really nailing down, milling your own grain, having your own gap settings for everything. There are breweries that I've talked to where they literally have enough brewers assistants and everything else that they mill X grain on X gap, and then they mill Y grain on Y gap. So it gets to the point where how nitty gritty do you want to get? How picky do you want to get? You again, you're in a system where if you're brewing 5 to 10 gallons, fuck it up. Don't be afraid to get dangerous with it.
Cool. This is a little bit more related back to your brewery again, but what beer trends have had the greatest effect on your brewery?
I mean, hazies for sure play a big part. A lot of, we got to fortunately see brew and watch the brewed IPA go from where it was to where it went to where it's at now. And I don't know who brews a brewed IPA still. They're around, I'm sure, but I don't know who. But as far as stuff like that, you see the mixed culture. I break people in the beer world down into two categories right away. New beer, old beer. New beer is the guys who come in, they ask about our barrel aged wilds, our fruited sours, our hazy IPAs, our adjuncted stouts. They don't want anything clear. They don't want anything that might just have the word pale in it. That's not their style. And then old beer's the kind of guys that I tend to align myself with, which are put anything in front of me and I'll drink it and I'll appreciate it for what it is. There's nothing that says a good Kolsch is not available to be above a 3.5 on Untapped. Sadly, people are the problem in the world, in my opinion, and that's never going to change. But what you run into is, again, stuff that just doesn't excite people, like a Kolsch or a simple smash lager or any of that. None of those really ever seem to get the attention they deserve or anything like that. And I've actually sat and watched people drink beer and say, wow, that's really good. There's nothing wrong with it. And then I've watched them slide that ticker up to a 3.25 or whatever they're going to give it. And then it's because there was no excitement to it, which is just comical to me, which is also why any pro brewer you talk to has probably got one phrase of fuck Untapped. Just don't care about it anymore. I don't know.
Cool. How do you maintain having fun and keeping the hobby aspect? Do you do this through small batches? And in what ways do you keep your energy up in running a brewery?
I woke up 15 minutes before this from a nap that I didn't plan to take, so energy is solid. As far as keeping stuff, it gets into yeah. Thank you, Billy. I'll probably grab another one. It gets into more so not necessarily experimental or small batches because I mean, you start to understand the grain, you start to understand the hops, you know what you're going to get out of things. Then you start to play with fermentation, or you start to play with what can I do to actively change this a little bit and mess around with it. So at that point, it's more, I don't know, playing around with new stuff or adding mixed culture, things like that. Or we just I don't know if anyone here got it. I think Billy had it, but the Cuvée 19. That was a blend of an imperial stout, a grisette, and our foeder. Which, when you say those three things were put together in a barrel for 6 months, most people are probably going to shrug away from that. It was probably one of my favorite things we've gotten to do. We watched an imperial stout get stripped of the roastiness. We watched the foeder take on the grisette first, take on the raw wheat first, and then dive into the stout and slowly take it terminal to 0 to 1 degree Plato. And essentially that was a lot of fun for me. That was one that we tasted every week, and it was fun to just literally see how that continued to change, how that continued to develop over the course of time. Another one, for obvious purpose, is the foeder. That's my baby. It's 18 barrels of golden sexiness for me. That, Jesus, is this one of you again? Nope, that's not. So anywho, it's one of those where all of that kind of stuff is that's the excitement, that's the development. I have no qualms brewing a hazy IPA TD Tossin, and people enjoy it, but I would prefer to mess around and brew the smash lager or find something fun and stick with that. Really nice background there, and it really hides the fact that you have no hair. So lots of fun stuff like that is how I keep going and keep my side of things fun and energetic.
Sure. We have about 3 more. If you're looking to get another beer, you can.
I'm gonna go get another beer.
Okay. Kevin Olson, I'm getting ready to pour some of the ESB that you so kindly helped me create. All right. You got your thirst quenched?
Yep.
3 favorite beers of all time.
3 favorite beers of all time. Woo. 3 favorite beers of all time. Fuck, that is a humdinger. Love Child number 4 for mixed culture. Stout would probably it was a test batch by Angry Chair, and I don't remember what it was called. It was no adjuncted, and the bartender handed it to me and said, "Fuck the popular." So I knew I was in for a good treat with that. And then probably the Boulevard Paleo. I will actually go one step further. The one of the better beers I've had in a long time came out of Thayer. The Golden Promise Pale Ale he did. I really liked that. Nick and Billy collaborated on a barreled Berliner Weiss that I thought was very tasty. Let's see here. Shocky, you made a New England for hip hops, if I remember right. That was really tasty as well. And those kind of stood out to me in the most recent. Hell, Christian, your first attempt at a New England was pretty goddamn good.
Hey, I appreciate that. I have kind of taken a pause from brewing it, but I think we're going to try another attempt here soon. So, most underrated beer style.
Kolsch.
Why is that?
It's a simple beer. There's absolutely nothing to it. It's so theoretically it's so easy to do that I've actually heard people say I'm not going to brew one because it's so simple. The comical thing is that there's absolutely nothing to hide behind. And if you are actually able to pull off a good Kolsch that people respect, impressive. Second up would be a Czech Pils. Third up would be a lager of any kind.
Cool. Let me see if anybody's throwing anything up right now to ask you. While we're waiting for that, talk to us about some of the things you've done at the brewery and anything that's coming up that you'd like to share. Personally, I think it was super cool how you coordinated the can event, and I know that was kind of your love child and something you were thinking about doing, but I think it was really cool that you took it outside of Diametric and made it more for the brewery community as a whole. So feel free to elaborate upon that and anything else that you guys have coming up.
Yeah, we shotgun beers and tried to figure out what the fuck we were gonna do because we're all kind of sitting here licking our wounds. I had the idea of a brewery's farmers market. Fuck that up on the news too. So we ran with it. Again, I'm the guy who dove into home brewing by building an electrically controlled system day one. I'm the guy who dove into a fucking commercial brewery head first. I shoot first, I ask later. Excuse me on that one. So one of the things that came to me is, again, it's the same thing I said to you guys: don't fuck it up, or go fuck it up. I mean, don't be afraid to fuck it up. And that is one of the things that I take to heart. The other one that came out of that is that old hockey coach of mine told me, "You win as a team, you lose as a team," and I take that very seriously. So every brewery out there right now is struggling. Every brewery out there is trying to figure out how to make ends meet, how to pay people, how to keep people. And so one of the things that we basically said was it's absolutely asinine for us to try and do that ourselves, keep it ourselves. go that route. So what we ended up doing was putting it out there for Eastern Jackson County as a trial run. I've got right now a list of 17 breweries that are going to be at the next one on April 4th. We're trying to see if we can get that to 25. So it's going to be bigger, better, crazier. We're literally trying to take everything that we can in Kansas City and move it forward, move it out there and get it done.
How about some cool projects that you have maybe going on at the brewery that you haven't already talked about?
We got our first pull off the foeder, 12 barrels. That's going multiple different directions. We're very excited about all of them. One of the things that plays into that, right, is obviously, though, the current situation is kind of taking our day-to-day to shit. So we have enough grain to brew probably 5 times. Our grain suppliers have basically all gotten the shelter in place as well. So we're pretty well fucked on that. So interesting projects right now are basically all of our barrels are being our main focus. They're always a Tuesday focus for us, but now it's kind of a 7 days a week we get to play with barrels and try to figure out what the hell we're going to do. When you can't get grain, you can't get hops, you can't get yeast, it's pretty tough to brew beer. That being said, we are in the works of talking to, we're agreed upon and talking to Crane about what recipe we're going to do as a collaboration. We're going to do 15 barrels of it, put it out. At this point, it's probably going to be distro only. I mean, we'll have like taproom sales of it and stuff, but the likelihood is it'll be done and sold before it's actually able to be sat and had on draft. So it'll be can release and probably can release distro and can release taprooms. But we're going to do something fun with Crane. That initially was going to be a big slick collaboration, but at this point it's likely just going to be for the fuck of it. Crane literally has no grain, and they saw over 60 barrels of beer get frozen in their moving process because of distro being frozen. So guys like Crane are the ones that I cannot express enough sympathy for. That feeling of watching, you guys have probably all been to our brewery at this point, I think, everyone I recognize here. So if you imagine our patio as having a minimum of 2 pallets completely covering it, if not 3 in some places, that's the amount of beer Crane is now sitting on that distro basically backed out of. So guys like that are who have my heart right now for sure. We're going to do whatever we can.
Does anybody else have any questions for Mac while we have him?
To clear up one thing, West and I actually still do not e-skate, but you know what? I'll try it with you one day, man.
I am supposed to check Messenger. Give me 1 second. Okay. Billy has a recommendation to do like a rapid fire here. So have fun with that. Favorite beer style?
IPA.
Favorite tap room you visited?
Oof. Shit, that's come back to that one.
Best aged beer you've had?
Black Project, Cygnus A.
Favorite quick meal at the brewery?
Beef stick and Cheez-Its.
Where's that? Oh, your own. I was like, where do you get that from? That's right. You guys have that there. Actually, that kind of spawns another question in my mind. Maybe that's why Billy wanted this at the end. How do you guys go about creating those relationships with those food trucks and maintaining that?
So I see a recording in the upper left corner. Is that real? Is this actually recording?
It is actually recording. I can pause it for a second if you want me to.
No, it's fine. Food trucks are great. I'd say that if it wasn't recording, I promise. Food trucks are my favorite. They're really reliable. They maintain their trucks really well. So whenever you expect them to be there, they're always there. It's amazing.
So tell us about social media's importance in running a brewery.
Social media is crucial to a brewery. You post once a day, only once a day, and your post includes a photo every time. That's the only way you can do social media as a venue such as a brewery, and get traction with it. The other thing is, right away you've lost all of your rights, if you will, as an owner for social media, with things like, there's no more talking about politics, there's no more talking about religion, there's no more talking about anything that you might necessarily stand up or believe in to an extent, because as soon as you align yourself one way or the other, you potentially have lost 50% of your customers.
Do you have any tips for, say, if homebrewers are going to a festival, or if a brewery is just getting started, for what they should be posting to social media and how they might go about posting that?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest way for that would be to go onto the Vista Prints, if you will, grab your $10 500 business cards. They don't need to be super fancy or super incredible for what you're trying to do, but have a Facebook page. Post when you're brewing, take videos, make sure the people who are following you know you. But everyone here, I think, has attended a festival or been to a festival where a beer knocked their socks off, or had someone that came up to you and said, "Wow, your beer was amazing. I'd love to know more about it," or "Can I buy kegs of this," or whatever. At that point, just throw them a card. Just, hey, here, check us out on social media, find us, follow us. You can see what we're doing, and that's kind of the stepping stone, if you will. Again, with that, it comes down to, don't be an idiot. Again, you really don't get to talk about anything that's controversial at this point. Sadly, it's 2020, so that's how the world works. You're either right or wrong on the internet, and every other person is also either right or wrong, and there's no compromise, there's no middle ground. But you just avoid the hot topics, if you will, and you go from there.
Everybody who's in, anything last to say to Mac, or any questions before we let him stop talking to us? Billy wants you to say something horrible to him.
I could never do that. We're still recording, and the things that I want to say to him are not going to go on that version.
I can pause it.
No need. Billy's a good dude. He just has a face I want to sit on.
Oh, Andy does have like a really great point that I want to make sure, because it's something that we've utilized. We really appreciate what you guys have done as far as, like, accepting the club in, and even going past that, giving us water, giving us these tips that, you said to me since day one when I showed up at the brewery with Palmer's How to Brew book and all that kind of stuff. So it's been really great, and you've been a wealth of knowledge, and we continue to thank you as a club.
Yeah, absolutely. We're here for all of you guys. I mean, if you guys need water, easy. If you need grains, if you need hops, just yell at us.
Except right now, right?
Even right now. I mean, again, we're all in this together, and it's a win as a team, lose as a team. So I mean, if we lose the homebrew community, the commercial breweries, honestly, just you're still stuck in a situation where it's not great. And I'm looking at the group that's in here, other than Nick, that dickbag that left for Iowa. The reality is, some of these people that I'm looking at are genuinely speaking, are some of our best customers, which, again, we don't have customers without you guys, which is another reason that we are willing to go above and beyond and do whatever we got to do.
What's something that we as a club could do to help out Diametric? Buy more beer?
Hugs and high fives.
Cool.
I mean, I wouldn't even go so far as to say buying beer or anything like that. Just make sure you're spreading the wealth and the love, and you know, it's tough to do, especially with the lobbying as it is. But one of the things that would be phenomenal is to see clubs truly get out there to every brewery, just play a rotating where they go. Excuse me. Even if it means driving to the Kansas side for a meeting or something like that on a night that a brewery's closed, but they're willing to let you guys in. Andy, you look a little hairy, buddy. But as far as things like that, yeah, I mean, like it's not just supporting us; it's supporting everyone. It's going to all these guys, you know. And I know for a fact if you guys reach out to the Williamson twins at Sandhills, Jonathan specifically, because he lives in Mission. If you guys reach out to those guys, they're going to give you a here's how we do oak lesson. They're going to talk you through it. They're going to put together a presentation. If you guys contact someone like Casey Beer Co., I know that they've been awesome to the group before, and they're going to be the guys who walk you through German water profiles. You know, I would have to Google a really good German water profile right now and get you the numbers on how you add that from RO versus Casey Beer Co. That's second nature. You know, those guys just know it. That's what they do. And again, that comes back, that kind of goes full circle for me to, I'm never the smartest guy in the room. I'm never the guy that is going to try and tell you I know everything, or you're right, I'm wrong, you're wrong, any of that. I'm pretty easy to get along with in that sense. And that's one of those things where, again, I will call Carlton Graham personally and say, hey, man, I'm messing up this beer, and I think it's the water. You know, if you haven't figured out, water is the most important beer, step one. And so I'll call Carlton and talk to him about Berliner Weisses. And I did that months ago. I did that when we were first opening, and I wasn't as pleased with the big batch Berliner Weiss versus the small we'd produced before. Talking to guys like Brian Stewart and trying to figure out what in the hell is going on with my mosaic, because it's not the mosaic I did as a home brewer. It's not the mosaic that I was tasting as a home brewer. Now I'm getting a little bit of that green onion garlicky bullshit to come through. What do I do? And you know, it's essentially a quick 10-degree temperature change. That's all it was. Mosaic is one of my favorite hops for sure. But it's a 10-degree temperature change because of surface area, because of the volume, because of everything else that plays in that I didn't know. So stuff like that is going and talking to the other breweries, going out to them, utilizing their knowledge, their resources, their brewers, their everything. And that's one of those things.
Are you willing to share what temperature you're throwing in Mosaic at?
In a whirlpool, I typically don't let Mosaic touch until 155. In a dry hop, I'm typically not letting Mosaic go above 58.
That was something and I'm still fairly new to homebrewing, but I had not thought of fermentation temperature having that great of an effect on dry hopping.
Huge.
Do you want to talk about that a little bit, maybe?
The big least effect. Yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff all plays in. It's all there. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that like 58.2 degrees is everything. No, it's not that. But I'm also, you know, there's a difference between 58 and 65 because that's what your garage is sitting at. So there is that. By the way, Catherine, it was really great to see you yawn. I'm glad I'm keeping everyone entertained here. That whole, you know, chestnut of temperature does play a huge aspect. Again, I'm not saying you can't avoid it, and homebrew temps are different. I'd have to look back up in my notes. I want to say 62 was Mosaic, was perfectly fine. But as far as like whirlpool temps and stuff like that, that's one of those going back to don't be afraid to fuck it up or fuck it up. You got to be shitty to get better. A lot of whirlpool temps for a lot of commercial brewers, especially the ones that you guys all seek out and search for the cans of beer from, like Treehouse. Their hazies they're very good. They're very good. They're very juicy. They're very everything. What you run into though is these guys are pushing limitations of temperature that by definition you're in danger zones on a lot of this. So you really, like, we sanitize the bowl that we put the hops in beforehand, and no hops actually touch our bare skin or anything like that, because we are in a temperature range where bacteria and stuff can actually grow when we're adding that. So we take extra steps to be clean and careful about it. But that kind of stuff is where I come full circle with, yeah, don't be afraid to screw it up, learn from it, and do it again.
Yeah, I think as a home brewer who's fairly new, that New England that I brewed, that was a mistake. Honestly, I have yet to figure out high alpha acid hops, and it's probably why I haven't dove into the hazy or to the IPAs as hard as I should. They're my favorite style of beer as well, but I think there's been.
I did not say they're my favorite style of beer.
You don't think that's my favorite?
No, I said they're not my favorite style.
Oh, I thought you said IPAs were your favorite style of beer.
IPA.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
IPA.
yeah. Let me. So.
You like any IPA?
That's.
Hi, Alicia.
Alicia is here. She brought puzzles. But yeah, I mean, it's probably why I haven't dove into any IPA, as deeply as I should, because it's my favorite style of beer. I've just been so afraid of the higher alpha acids.
Don't be. Again, don't be afraid to screw it up. It's part of it. We joke around on our shitty days of, man, I miss the 5-gallon batches. I miss being able to watch hockey while we brewed beer and just let it roll. And those jokes they're both serious and they're both jokes for a reason. And one of the things about it is, dumping 5 gallons of beer, boy, that doesn't hurt your emotions too much. But dumping 300 gallons of beer, that hurts your emotions a lot more. So it's a big difference on where you're at with that side of things.
Sure. Well, we've taken up a good chunk of your night, and we've gone past an hour, so I guess we succeeded. But before I release the hounds and unmute everybody, I just want to say thanks from the exec board for letting us kind of hit you up last minute. And thanks for giving us these answers. It's big. All of this will be sent out to the club. And we're just really appreciative of what you guys and what Diametric's done for the club. So thanks.
Absolutely.
So now,
I'm here to help if you guys need anything else, water, all that stuff.